Hey everybody, Dana Dahlquist here. Going to do a swing analysis for everyone of Cauley. Real quickly though, before I even get started, we are going to do this a little differently. And the only thing we're going to really do is we're going to look at things that will improve the regular golfer. And the reason why I'm doing this is because, you know, I don't want to basically scrutinize what a lot of these players are doing. And you know, a lot of them have, you know, pretty orthodox stuff going on, and you know, if we start fine-toothing a lot of the things that they do, it just takes away from things that will actually help you, the golfer. So, in any event, a couple things with what this player does is he has a very orthodox setup. Okay, as far as the positioning of his body, grip. Like you look at the grip here, it looks good. Is there anything that's really a slight change? You know, I don't really know. It depends on a couple factors as far as what he's doing at impact, and those things we can't see it with a camera. So, but we get a general idea. From what I'm told, a friend of mine plays and practices a little bit with Bud, and he kind of told me that he hits a medium high to high shot with his driver and long club. So we can kind of see that. All right. So in any event, setup's really good. If there was one thing that I think would aid the average golfer, however, it would be to get a little bit more foot flare, especially on the left foot, because when you don't do that, and I'll show you the implications later, you can see there's a compensation that Bud does in his swing, and it'll make a lot of sense once we see it. Okay. So as far as for the average golfer here, a couple things. I think in the address position, things look pretty stable. Okay, and what I mean by stable is that the knees, hips, shoulders, everything kind of lines up on top of themselves. There's no rightward or leftward leaning at address, nothing really unorthodox going on. And a lot of that just stems from probably getting some level of instruction when he first started out, and has pretty much been successful with that, so he's going to keep doing it. All right. So from the caddy view or the forward view, what you'll notice is when he goes back, one thing I think everybody should try to emulate to a degree is that he rotates when the club gets halfway back. We'll use the PC version for a moment and call that shoulder turn. Okay. Now, like in previous videos I've done, I go a little bit into what that is, but he does rotate his shoulders 90 degrees when his left arm's parallel to the ground. Okay, that's not all that's happening. We can see that his right leg extends, and we know that because he's wearing some very nice plaid pants. And you can see that the plaid is pretty much, if we go like this, you can see the plaid is matched up. That means he's been to a tailor, and as he moves into his backswing, his right leg extends, and you can see that the plaid has now changed. Okay, and that's going to be my new thing. If you come take lessons, you better be wearing plaid pants so we can see that. All right, but you can see that definitely the knees and hips have rotated, the upper center has rotated, and his right hip is worked back and away from its original position, and the right leg has lost flex. Now when I say straighten, that doesn't mean it locks out. Okay, this means he's lost flex and his right hip has moved back and away from its original position. So when you look at this down the line view, you can definitely see that's occurring. Okay? Now, the difference between these two swings, and I'm going to make it a little apparent, is that the one on the right is in practice, and the one on the left is in real play. So there's a little bit more force done on the one on the left than there is the one on the right. Okay, and that's just because he's obviously playing and he's trying to hit the ball far, and it's with a driver. This is with a 3-wood, and it's a little bit more of a controlled environment, so I'd expect the hips to rotate more on the picture on the right if it was in a real playing scenario. Okay, but I do think for the average player, this would be the second piece that you would try to emulate. I think it's really important that you have freedom of the knees and hips to allow the upper torso to rotate the backswing. I'm not going to get into all the nuances of how this is occurring, but you will definitely notice if I put a little dot right on his left shoulder and put a little dot right around the center of his body, you're going to see his left shoulder goes down and in, and just very much like Ricky Fowler, his left shoulder goes past the center of rotation. Okay, so that means that his shoulders appear to look like they've rotated quite a bit. Now in reality, there's actually something else going on in there. There's obviously a lot of thoracic extension and stuff going on in there for that to happen, other than just rotation. Okay, because if he just rotated, his head would move about 1.5 feet to the right. So there's some stuff countering that rotation, and there's some extension, and obviously that happens because he's bent over the dress. Okay, so that's what's going on. But the Golf Digest version, we just call that turning. Okay, all right. So now here's what's interesting. Just like Ricky Fowler and a lot of great players that play at a high level, and we're not going to get too much into that, but you're going to notice that his hips go into a flexion state. So I'm going to put a little line right here on his belt, because we're going to get into what this is actually doing. So from an address, you're going to see his belt's here, goes to the top of his swing. We're going to call that extension right here, right before he changes direction. So this is right, this is there. So you can see his belt, right hip joint's higher than his left. And then as he goes down, there's a change of direction, and he goes into flexion. Okay, now this is important because this is a power move. So it changes direction. Okay, and I'm not going to get into ball position and ball flight, all that kind of stuff, because it doesn't matter for the average player when looking at this film. Okay, it's all speculation on my point if I did, and I'm not going to do that. But what we're going to get into is this original line that I put down here. I'm going to make a yellow and a red line. If I was in advertising, that would be a pretty good thing, having yellow and red together, so I did it. Just kind of highlighting, okay? So as you come down, you're going to notice that his left foot is going to start changing as his belt changes. So see his belt actually start getting a little higher, a little higher, a little higher, to the point that his left foot actually completely comes off the ground and moves to a flared position. So this kind of makes me wonder. I had one player one time ask me, I'm not going to name names, but a couple people have heard this story where I was on the range and he asked me what he thought of his feet, because I was hitting some balls, and he looked at me and he goes, your left foot's flared out, why do you do that? And I went through the explanation. I said, well, I'm just eliminating a piece that naturally occurs in the golf swing by, I flare it out so I don't have to flare it when I come down to impact. And ironically, when he looked at his feet, he did the same thing, and he does that so that he doesn't destroy his knees. So you can see how he replants it. Okay, so he's actually airborne at the impact interval. Okay, so he's not doing anything but just kind of using the ground and jumping up. Now he does that so that his belt raises and his hands raise at impact. See that? So his hands are raised at the impact zone. Now he does this so he can still hit out on the golf ball and create an arc that goes up and out to the right. That's at least his feels. And I think that's a good feel. I'm going to say that, a good feel for people to do. Okay, it's real important that you get your belt to extend for power. Okay, it doesn't just purely rotate. Okay, it looks like hip turn, but it's actually extension. Okay, so the 3D guys would say that at the top of his swing he's produced extension in his pelvis, stabilization and flexion in the pelvis, and then everything comes down and goes back into extension, excuse me. Okay, which some people call that releasing your pelvis or releasing your tilts to wallop the ball. Okay, and you're going to see that here from flexion on the rear. It comes in, and you can see how his belt starts to extend. Okay, and you can actually see that his belt starts to extend, go from a flexion state to an extension state. And that's why at the follow through his hips will appear to be very level because they fully extended. Okay. They didn't rotate at all. At least maybe a few degrees. Okay, but it's more or less it stabilizes, flexion, goes into extension. Okay? So the three things I think for players to look at when looking at his swing, okay? Is it one that you want to emulate? Well, I don't like emulation. I like taking parts from each golfer and saying, look, this is a piece that this player does real well. This is a piece that this other player does real well. And if they're compatible, we blend them together. But sometimes some pieces aren't compatible. But in his case, I would say that from the address positioning, pull this all the way. I like using caddy on his, or the forward view. I like the way how he sets up, very orthodox with his elbow positioning and his grip. I think that's pretty important. Like I said, I'd like to add foot flare for him. And then just because he's a young guy and later on he might have some hip or some knee issues because of that. Backswing, I like how his hips and knees turn. Okay, you can say how they go into extension and rotation, but how they turn. Golf Digest verbiage. And then on the downstroke, I like how he regains his flexion and then goes into extension right through here. Okay, and I think for the higher handicap player, I like the extension piece because it's getting the handle to raise and it gets his arms staying close together. You don't see any chicken winging going on right here. Right? There's no chicken winging going on right here. Right? And the reason for that is because of the extension of the belt. Okay? Now you're going to see that with a lot of players. You're going to see that with this gentleman. Right here, I'll put him at the same location. You're going to see the handle raising and the hips raising. And him also getting airborne. Now luckily for Tiger, in the last few years, or last year, he's actually changed his foot so that he can do that. Okay, without snapping, locking, and jumping too much to change that foot, so he doesn't have another knee surgery. Okay, so you can see how that's occurring in both these players. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions or comments you want to make, please put that on the YouTube page, and be happy to answer it. Okay, you guys all have a good day. Talk to you later.